My name is Daniel Carter. For 24 years, I lived in a house where everyone reminded me of the same thing. I wasn't really part of the family. Not officially, not emotionally, and definitely not financially. My parents never said it in exactly those words when other people were around. In public, they smiled and introduced me as their son. But inside the house, things were different. Inside the house, I was the extra person, the one who didn't belong, the one who got the leftovers, the one who was constantly reminded that everything I had was temporary. My younger brother Ryan was the real son, the golden child, the future of the Carter family. And me, I was just Daniel, the mistake, the lesson. At least that's what my mother used to call me. "You should be grateful we kept you," she once told me when I was 13. I never forgot that sentence. Not because it hurt, but because it made me realize something. They weren't joking. They actually believed it. And for years, I believed it too. Until the day my grandfather's lawyer read the will, and suddenly, the entire room went silent. Because the man my parents said didn't consider me family had left everything to me. But before I tell you how that happened, let me take you back to the beginning. And if stories about family betrayal and unexpected justice interest you, take a moment to like and subscribe. It helps more people hear stories like this. Also, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's go back to the house where I grew up. We lived in a large 2-story home in Westchester County, New York. From the outside, it looked like a perfect suburban life. White siding, perfect lawn, 2 expensive cars in the driveway. My father was a financial advisor who worked with wealthy clients. My mother ran a boutique interior design studio. And my brother Ryan attended one of the best private schools in the state. To the neighbors, we were the ideal American family. But inside the house, the rules were different. Ryan's room was on the 2nd floor. Mine was in the basement. It wasn't technically a bedroom. It used to be a storage space. Concrete floor. 1 small window near the ceiling. A metal bed frame my parents bought at a garage sale. My mother always explained it the same way. "Ryan needs space to study," she said. "You're more independent." I learned very quickly independent meant something else. It meant I didn't get things. Ryan had a MacBook by the time he was 14. I had a second-hand laptop that barely turned on. Ryan had a new car for his 16th birthday. I got a used bicycle. Ryan went to a $35,000 a year private school. I went to public school across town. And every time I asked why things were different, my father gave the same answer. "Life isn't equal, Daniel." It took me years to understand what he meant. Ryan wasn't just treated better. He was treated like the investment. I was treated like the expense. The thing that really confused people was that Ryan and I looked nothing alike. He had blonde hair and blue eyes like our mother. I had dark hair and brown eyes like my grandfather. At family gatherings, distant relatives sometimes asked questions. "Are they both yours?" someone once asked my mother. She laughed. "Yes, technically." Technically. That word stuck with me. When I was 15, I made the mistake of asking my father what that meant. He stared at me for a long time. Then he said something I didn't fully understand at the time. "You're lucky we gave you a place to live." After that, I stopped asking questions. The only person in the family who treated me differently was my grandfather, Arthur Carter. He lived about 30 minutes away in a large stone house near the river. When I was younger, he invited both Ryan and me to visit on weekends, but Ryan rarely went. He preferred hanging out with friends or playing video games, so most of the time, it was just me and Grandpa. We would sit on the back porch and drink lemonade. He told stories about building his company from nothing. Back in the 1970s, he started a small construction business. Over the decades, it grew into one of the largest regional contractors in the state. By the time I was born, he was already wealthy. Very wealthy. But he never acted like it. He drove an old pickup truck, wore the same brown jacket for 10 years, and preferred diners over expensive restaurants. Sometimes he asked me questions about school. Sometimes we talked about books. And sometimes we just sat there in silence watching the river. One afternoon when I was 16, he asked me something strange. "Do you feel like you belong in that house?" I didn't answer. He studied my face carefully. Then he nodded slowly, like he already knew the truth. That day he said something I wouldn't understand until much later. Family isn't always about blood, Daniel. It's about who stands beside you. At the time, I thought he was just being philosophical. Now I realize he was trying to warn me. When I turned 18, things inside the house got worse. Ryan had just been accepted into a prestigious business school. My parents threw him a massive graduation party. More than 100 guests, catering, music, a rented tent in the backyard. When my graduation came a few weeks later, there was no party. My mother made a small dinner. Just the four of us. Halfway through the meal, my father said something that would change everything. After summer, you'll need to start paying rent. I stared at him. Rent? You're an adult now, he said calmly. Ryan is going to college. We need to focus our resources. My mother nodded like it was obvious. You can stay in the basement for $600 a month. I was still working part-time at a grocery store. $600 might as well have been $6,000. That night I realized something important. They weren't planning a future for me. They were planning a future without me. 3 months later, I moved out. I rented a tiny room above a mechanic shop. It smelled like oil and gasoline, but it was mine. I worked 2 jobs. During the day at the grocery store, at night delivering food. It was exhausting, but it was also the first time in my life I felt free. My parents barely contacted me. Ryan never called. Only one person kept checking on me. Grandpa. Every few weeks he invited me for dinner. Sometimes we went fishing. Sometimes we just talked. Once he asked me if I needed money. I refused. I didn't want charity. He respected that. But before I left that night, he said something quietly. One day things will make sense. I didn't know what he meant. I just nodded. 2 years later, everything changed. I was 22. It was a cold November morning when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. When I answered, a calm voice introduced himself. Daniel Carter? Yes. This is Thomas Blake. I'm your grandfather, Arthur Carter's attorney. My stomach tightened. Is he okay? There was a pause. I'm very sorry to inform you. Your grandfather passed away last night. The words hit me like a truck. Even though he was older, I never imagined the world without him. He requested that the entire family attend the reading of his will. The attorney paused again. The meeting is scheduled for Friday morning. I hung up the phone and sat there for a long time. The only person in my family who truly cared about me was gone. But I had no idea that Friday morning would reveal something none of us expected. Something that would tear my entire family apart. Because for 24 years, my parents told me I wasn't really part of the Carter family. On Friday morning, we were about to find out the truth, and none of them were prepared for it. The morning of the will reading felt colder than it should have. Not because of the weather, because of the people I was about to see. I hadn't been in the same room with my parents for almost a year, and the last conversation we had ended with my father reminding me that I still owed them money for letting me live there after 18. I almost didn't go. But Grandpa deserved better than that. So Friday morning, I put on the only suit I owned and drove to the office address the lawyer had given me. The building was in downtown White Plains. Tall glass windows, marble floors, the kind of place where people talked quietly and walked quickly. The receptionist directed me to a conference room on the 12th floor. When I opened the door, everyone was already there. My mother, my father, my brother Ryan, and 2 people I didn't recognize, probably the lawyers. The moment I walked in, the room went silent. Ryan was the first to speak. Well, look who decided to show up. His voice had that same casual arrogance I remembered, like my presence was some kind of inconvenience. My mother glanced at me and immediately frowned. You look tired, she said. Are you still working those delivery jobs? I nodded. She shook her head slightly. Such disappointment. Like I had personally embarrassed her. My father didn't say hello. He simply asked the question that had clearly been on his mind since I walked in. Did the attorney tell you why you were invited? No, I said. He leaned back in his chair. That's strange. Then he smiled slightly. Because this meeting concerns the family estate. The word family hung in the air like a challenge. Ryan laughed quietly. Maybe Grandpa left you his fishing rod. The 2 strangers exchanged uncomfortable glances. That's when the door opened and the attorney walked in. Thomas Blake, mid-50s, gray hair, perfectly pressed suit. He carried a thick leather folder and placed it carefully on the table. Good morning, he said. Then he looked directly at me. "Thank you for coming, Daniel." The way he said my name caught my father's attention. Something about it felt different, respectful. Blake sat down and opened the folder. "As you all know, Arthur Carter passed away 3 days ago." The room became very still. Even Ryan stopped smirking. Before his death, Mr. Carter left detailed instructions regarding the distribution of his estate. He glanced around the table. His estate includes the Carter Construction Group, several investment accounts, real estate holdings, and personal assets. My father nodded confidently. Of course he did. Everyone in the room already assumed how this would go. Ryan was the golden grandson, the future businessman. My father had worked closely with Grandpa for years. In their minds, the inheritance was obvious. Blake continued. The total estimated value of the estate is approximately $43 million. Ryan let out a quiet whistle. My mother smiled. My father folded his hands like a man who was about to receive what he'd been waiting for his entire life. Then Blake said something unexpected. However, Mr. Carter left very specific instructions regarding how the will should be read. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. Before I begin distributing the assets, he asked me to read a letter. Ryan rolled his eyes. A letter? Blake ignored him. He cleared his throat and began reading. To my family. If you are hearing this letter, it means I am no longer there to explain things myself. Over the years, I have watched each of you grow into the people you are today. Some of what I saw made me proud. Some of it made me disappointed. My mother shifted slightly in her chair. My father frowned. Blake continued. For most of my life, I believed the Carter name represented hard work, loyalty, and integrity. But in recent years, I began to realize something painful. Those values are not shared equally within this family. Ryan crossed his arms. This is ridiculous, he muttered. Blake kept reading. There is one member of this family who was consistently treated as if he did not belong. At that moment, every eye in the room slowly turned toward me. My stomach tightened. Blake's voice remained steady. I watched it happen for years. I watched the way he was spoken to, the way he was excluded, the way he was made to feel like a burden. My mother looked uncomfortable now. My father's jaw tightened. Blake continued. The strange thing is, he was the only one who never asked for anything. He worked. He struggled. And he carried himself with more dignity than the people who claimed to be his family. My hands were shaking under the table. I had no idea where this was going. Blake turned the page. So before the rest of this will is read, there is something everyone in this room needs to understand. Ryan leaned forward impatiently. Can we get to the part about the money? Blake ignored him again. Family is not defined by who you favor. It is defined by who you protect. There was a long pause. Then Blake looked directly at me and read the next line. Daniel Carter, you were the only one who never forgot that. The room went silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. Blake closed the letter slowly. That concludes Mr. Carter's message. Ryan leaned back in his chair. Great speech, he said sarcastically. So what do we actually get? Blake opened another document. Now we will proceed with the distribution of assets. My father straightened in his seat. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. Blake began reading. To my son, Michael Carter, I leave my personal watch collection in the 1969 Mustang. My father blinked. That's it? Blake continued. To my daughter-in-law, Linda Carter, I leave the lake house furniture and personal jewelry belonging to my late wife. My mother looked confused. Ryan laughed. Okay, funny joke. Then Blake read the next line. To my grandson, Ryan Carter, I leave a trust fund of $50,000 to assist with future expenses. Ryan stopped laughing. 50,000? His voice cracked. That's nothing. The room became tense. Everyone was waiting for the real announcement. The big inheritance. The company. The millions. Blake turned the final page. Then he spoke the sentence that changed everything. The remainder of my estate. He paused. Including Carter Construction Group, all financial investments, and all real estate holdings. My father leaned forward. Ryan's eyes lit up. Is hereby left in full to my grandson. Blake looked directly at me. Daniel Carter. For a moment no one moved. No one breathed. Ryan laughed nervously. Okay. Very funny. Blake didn't smile. My father stood up so suddenly his chair fell backward. That's impossible. Blake slid the document across the table. The will was signed, notarized, and legally witnessed. Ryan's face had turned pale. You're saying he left $40 million? He pointed at me. To him? My mother stared at the paper like it might change if she looked long enough. My father's voice became dangerously quiet. There must be a mistake. Blake shook his head slowly. There is no mistake. The room exploded. Ryan slammed his hand on the table. This is insane. My mother turned to me, her eyes wide with panic. Daniel, you know this isn't fair. Fair? The word felt almost funny. My father stepped closer to the table. You're going to decline this, he said. Not asked. Told. You don't even understand how to run a company. Blake calmly closed the folder. That won't be necessary. My father glared at him. What does that mean? Blake folded his hands. It means Mr. Carter anticipated this reaction. Then he said something that made the room even colder. There is one final document that explains why Daniel was chosen. My brother whispered, What the hell is going on? Blake opened a sealed envelope and said quietly, Because Daniel Carter is the only biological grandson Arthur Carter ever had. The room froze. Ryan's face drained of color. My father went completely still, and my mother looked like someone had just ripped the ground out from under her feet. I sat there unable to move, unable to understand what I had just heard. Because if what the lawyer said was true, then the family secret my parents had hidden for 24 years was about to be exposed. For a long time after my grandmother died, no one in the family spoke to me. Not my parents, not my brother, not even distant relatives who had watched everything happen that night. But 3 days later, I received a call from the attorney handling my grandmother's estate. Mr. Carter, the woman said politely, the will reading is scheduled for Friday morning. Your attendance is required. Required. That word made me pause. Required? I asked. Are you sure you have the right person? Yes, she said calmly. Your grandmother specifically requested that you be present. I almost laughed. Required. After everything that had happened, the idea that my family would suddenly want me in the same room felt ridiculous. But I agreed to come. Not because I expected anything, just because I wanted closure. The law office was in an old brick building downtown. When I arrived, the conference room door was already open. And inside, everyone was there. My parents sat together on one side of the long table. My brother leaned back in his chair, scrolling on his phone like he didn't care about any of it. 2 of my aunts whispered to each other near the window. When I stepped inside, the room went quiet. My mother's lips tightened. My father didn't even look at me. And my brother smirked. Well, he said loudly, look who decided to show up. I ignored him and took the only empty seat. At the far end of the table sat the attorney, a calm woman in her late 50s with silver glasses and a thick folder in front of her. She waited until everyone was seated before speaking. Thank you all for coming, she said. We are here to read the last will and testament of Margaret Carter. My grandmother. Just hearing her name made my chest tighten. The attorney opened the folder. Before we begin, she said, I want to clarify something. Mrs. Carter revised this will 2 weeks before her passing. Immediately, my father sat up straighter. My brother leaned forward. Good, he muttered. About time, the attorney continued. Mrs. Carter left instructions regarding how her estate should be distributed. We will follow those instructions exactly. Then she began reading. The first few items were simple. My grandmother left small donations to several charities. Then she distributed a few pieces of jewelry to distant relatives. My aunts nodded politely. Everything seemed routine. Until the attorney reached the next page. She paused, then looked directly at my parents. The family home, she said slowly, along with the surrounding land and all associated property, is to be transferred in full ownership to. She glanced down again. My grandson, Daniel Carter. For a moment, the room was silent. Then my brother laughed. Wait, he said. What? My father leaned forward. That's a mistake. The attorney shook her head calmly. It is not a mistake. My mother's voice rose. Daniel doesn't even live there. The attorney continued reading. Additionally, Mrs. Carter's investment accounts, savings accounts, and personal assets totaling approximately $2.4 million are to be placed in a trust. She paused again, with Daniel Carter named as the sole beneficiary. The room exploded. That's insane! My brother shouted. My father slammed his hand on the table. This is ridiculous. My mother turned toward me like I had personally betrayed her. You manipulated her. But the attorney calmly raised her hand. "I'm not finished." Everyone slowly fell silent again. She flipped to the final page. Mrs. Carter also left a personal letter to be read aloud. Then she began. "If you are hearing this letter, it means I am gone. I know this decision will surprise many of you, but it should not. For years, I watched how my family treated Daniel. I watched the way he was excluded, dismissed, and made to feel like he didn't belong. And I stayed silent longer than I should have. That is my greatest regret. Daniel was the only person who visited me without expecting anything in return, the only one who called to check on me, the only one who sat beside my hospital bed when everyone else was too busy. Family is not determined by blood alone. It is determined by kindness. And Daniel has shown more of it than anyone else in this room. That is why everything I built will now belong to him. Not as a reward, but as a correction. A correction for the way he was treated by the people who should have protected him. Daniel, if you're listening, I hope this gives you the freedom to build the life you deserve, and to never again sit at a table where you are not wanted." When the attorney finished reading, the room was completely silent. My mother looked pale. My brother stared at the table. My father's face had turned red with anger. But none of them spoke, because for the first time, there was nothing they could say. The attorney closed the folder. "Mr. Carter," she said, looking at me, "if you would like, we can begin the transfer process today." I sat there for a moment, trying to process everything my grandmother had known, all those years. She had seen everything, and she had waited for the right moment to make it right. I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said, "I'd like that." I stood up to leave, and for the first time in my life, no one tried to stop me. No one argued, no one demanded anything. They just watched. As I walked out of the room, out of the building, and out of the version of my life where I had spent years trying to prove I belonged somewhere I was never wanted. Outside, the air felt different, lighter. For the first time in years, I felt free. 6 months later, I moved into my grandmother's house. I renovated it slowly, keeping the parts she loved most. The garden, the old oak tree in the backyard, her reading room by the window. Sometimes I still imagine her sitting there, smiling quietly, knowing that in the end, the truth came out. And the person who was treated like he didn't belong was the one she trusted the most. If there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's this. Sometimes the people who say you're not part of the family are the ones who never understood what family really means. Because real family doesn't make you fight for a seat at the table. They save you one. And if you enjoyed this story, tell me in the comments. Have you ever been treated like the outsider in your own family? Because sometimes the people who feel the most invisible are the ones who end up changing everything.